Chosen one. Heaven fought to protect your soul. From the moment your spirit was forged in the fire of divine intention, forces beyond comprehension began to stir in your favor. You were not created to be average. You were not born to simply exist. You were formed in sacred silence, carved out of light and eternity, and sent into this world under the watch of guardians whose loyalty transcends time. Heaven saw your path before you took your first breath, and it knew, deeply, fiercely, and wholly, that this soul of yours would be a target, not because of weakness, but because of potential, not because of flaw, but because of your glow. The darkness recognized your light, and it trembled. So heaven rose. It fought, not just for your life, but for your destiny. This video is not just a message. It is a mirror, a moment of remembering what was long hidden. You are the one whose name was whispered in sacred places, the one whose heart would one day pulse with the rhythm of a higher plan. That day is now. Watch this video to the end, chosen one, and let your energy remember what your mind may have forgotten. Then write your warmest wishes in the comments, followed by the number 77, the sacred signal of alignment and protection. For this is also a chapter about wishes coming true and the universe responding to the fullness of your awakened light. But that is only a small part of the story. The deeper truth lies in the battle for your soul. Now, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive deeper. There were nights you couldn't sleep, and you didn't know why, but heaven did. There were mornings where heaviness sat on your chest, and it wasn't just emotion, it was resistance, pressing down on potential. Forces tried to intercept the mission you carried. They saw your rising long before you did. And so, unseen wars were waged in realms your eyes could not perceive. You weren't abandoned, chosen one. You were fiercely defended. While you cried yourself to sleep, angels stood guard. While you questioned your value, heaven reaffirmed it. And every time you doubted, the divine didn't flinch. It only fought harder. You may have wondered why so many walked away, why betrayal felt so frequent, why loneliness gripped you when all you ever wanted was peace. But these weren't accidents. They were extractions. People removed not because you failed them, but because their presence would have failed your purpose. Heaven saw what you couldn't. It knew who would love you only when convenient. It knew who would anchor you to versions of yourself you were destined to outgrow. So it cleared the path. It hurt, yes, but protection often masquerades as loss. And what you lost never outweighed what you were being prepared to gain. There is a truth about your soul that even you have barely dared to accept. It is ancient, older than fear, deeper than doubt. It carries echoes of lifetimes and light codes of generations. And that truth scared those who benefit from confusion. There were forces, spiritual, mental, emotional, that sought to scatter your power before it found its center. So heaven stepped in. In silence, it removed traps. In stillness, it sealed portals. In love, it surrounded you with invisible armor. Every delay you resented was in truth a shield. Every disappointment, a redirection. Because you were never walking alone, even when you felt most abandoned. Think of the times when death came close, the near accidents, the sickness that faded suddenly, the disaster that was narrowly avoided. These were not coincidences. These were intercessions. You were not meant to exit early. You were meant to endure, to arrive, to ascend. And so you did. What was supposed to break you became the catalyst for transformation. What was designed to confuse you became the pressure that made you clear. You've been walking through fire, chosen one, but only because gold must be refined. And you are heaven's gold. This is why the world didn't make sense to you. Why superficial things never satisfied. Why you saw more, felt more, dreamed differently. You weren't made to fit in. You were crafted to stand apart, and those who walk the narrow path often walk alone until they awaken fully and see they were never alone at all. There were prayers whispered for you by those long gone, ancestral spirits who passed their strength to your DNA. There were promises made to your soul before you came here, and they are still unfolding. You are the fulfillment of generations, the hope of many, the living proof that heaven intervenes. You weren't chosen because of perfection. You were chosen because of resilience, because despite what you endured, you never truly gave up. Even when broken, something in you kept reaching. And that reaching called down reinforcement. You don't remember it all, but there were moments in your childhood, moments of silence, stillness, or awe, when something touched your spirit. That was confirmation, a nod from the divine. You didn't imagine it. That presence never left. It's still here, even now as you listen. The soul you carry is surrounded by agreements that stretch beyond this lifetime. There are spiritual contracts, sacred assignments, and blessings held in trust for your appointed time. You are stepping into that time now, and as you do, opposition may rise again. Not because you're failing, but because you're getting close. Stay strong. The battles now are echoes of wars already won. You are not starting from scratch. You are continuing a victory that began long ago. Each step forward is a reclaiming, a remembering, a resurrection of the truth that darkness tried to bury. The voices in your head, the doubt, the fear, the imposter syndrome, are not yours. They are remnants of old programming, leftovers from systems that needed you small, silent, and stuck. But you're not that anymore. Heaven didn't fight for a prisoner. It fought for a warrior, a light bearer, a soul with purpose beyond comprehension. And if you ever feel weak, know that power is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet persistence. Sometimes it's the soft refusal to quit. That is power, and you have it. You are the reason some doors stayed closed, because your spirit was too big for small spaces, because what you carried couldn't thrive in mediocrity, and because heaven wouldn't allow you to be poisoned by comfort. That's why you've been stretched, tested, stripped, and refined, not to harm you, but to reveal you. You didn't lose your way. You were being recalibrated. You weren't being punished. You were being prepared. Because where you're going requires depth, requires strength, requires truth. And you, chosen one, are all three. There are whispers in the spirit even now, celebrations in realms unseen, because you're awakening, you're aligning, you're stepping into a truth too heavy for the unprepared, but perfect for the soul heaven shielded. This is your arrival, not to the end, but to the beginning of the life you were always meant to live, the one that honors your pain, your lessons, your power, and above all, your protection. For heaven didn't fight to keep you average, it fought to keep you holy, set apart, destined. And now the heavens wait to see what you'll do with the soul they defended. You are more than your past, more than your trauma, more than your doubts. You are a divine assignment in human form. And if you ever forget, come back to this truth. Heaven fought for you, not because you were weak, but because you were worth it. Not because you were in danger, but because you were important. And now, chosen one, it's your time to rise, to reclaim what was preserved for you. To walk fully in the light they tried to dim, and to become the miracle your soul has always known you are. There were moments, chosen one, when it seemed like everything was against you, like every plan failed just before its breakthrough, like every connection ended just when it began to feel real. These were not accidents, they were divine reroutes, not because you weren't worthy of peace, but because peace without purpose is a prison. You were meant for something more than comfort. You were built for meaning. So the path was stripped of illusions, and what remained was raw, real, and sacred. Heaven did not fight to protect your illusions, it fought to preserve your essence. When storms came, you were not being punished, you were being purified. And in the depths of those storms, while your cries echoed in the void, celestial hands were reaching for you, not to pull you away, but to anchor you in place until the winds passed. Some of the battles you fought weren't even yours. They were inherited burdens, generational chains, curses clothed as patterns, and yet you bore them, broke them, bled for a freedom others were too afraid to claim. You are the culmination of a war that didn't begin with you, but ends with you. There were dark nights when you begged for release, for something, anything, to change. And it didn't, not immediately. Because heaven wasn't just working on your circumstances, it was working on your soul, refining you in places the world doesn't see, strengthening your roots so that when the blessing came, it wouldn't crush you. Many would have cracked under what you carried. Many did. But you didn't. You staggered. You fell. But you rose. Again and again. And every rise was watched, recorded, honored. You were not unseen. Your soul has endured more than most will ever understand. Yet you've kept compassion alive. You've kept your heart open, even when bleeding. That is not weakness. That is divine resilience. That is why heaven fought for you. Because the light you carry is not ordinary. It's the kind that spreads even when dimmed. It's the kind that wakes others up simply by existing. And the world needs that light now more than ever. There is a sacredness to your suffering, a holiness in your healing. Every time you chose forgiveness over vengeance, you aligned more with the divine. Every time you loved when it would have been easier to shut down, you reflected the face of the unseen. You were chosen not because you are perfect, but because you are willing. And willingness is heaven's favorite soil. From it, entire kingdoms are born, and within you, a kingdom is stirring. Some will never understand what you've endured. They will only see the glow that comes after. They won't know the cost of your peace, the nights it took to earn your calm. But heaven knows. Heaven saw the silent decisions, the ones where you chose faith without any visible reason, the ones where you stayed when running looked easier, the ones where you believed, not because you had proof, but because something deep within whispered, "Keep going." That whisper was not your imagination. It was your soul remembering its assignment. There's a grace on your life that confuses those who expect you to break, a favor that opens doors no resume can justify, because you are moving under heaven's protection, not as a shield to hide behind, but as a wind that carries you. You don't have to fight every battle. Some are already won. You don't have to explain your value. Some things are self-evident to those who can see, and those who cannot were never meant to walk beside you anyway. You are walking into seasons you once thought were only dreams, not because circumstances suddenly changed, but because you changed, and heaven responds to that. It honors evolution. As you shifted, so did the atmosphere. And now, paths are aligning. Doors are opening. People are being positioned, not randomly, but in direct response to who you've become. You are no longer just a vessel. You are now a voice. A carrier of frequencies too sacred to be wasted on the trivial. That's why your soul had to be refined, so the message wouldn't be distorted. Don't downplay what you've overcome. The enemy hoped you would. Hoped you'd forget the strength it took to keep your heart soft. Hoped you'd stay silent about the nights that almost broke you. But your story is sacred, and your scars are not stains. They are seals. Proof that the battle was real, but you were more real. That darkness tried, but failed. That you were chosen and preserved. That heaven fought for your soul and won. Look around you now, not with fear, but with reverence. Every delay was a decision made in love. Every ending was an act of mercy. Every silence, a shield. You didn't see it then, but you will see it now. Everything withheld was heaven's way of saying, not yet, not like this. Something better is coming, and better is here, not in the form of ease, but in the form of alignment. You are aligned, not just with your purpose, but with your protection. You've been misunderstood, misjudged, mislabeled, but none of that defines you. What defines you is the fact that you kept going, that you stayed soft in a hardened world, that you allowed your pain to become purpose, that you trusted even when the path made no sense. That kind of faith bends time. That kind of light invites miracles. That kind of soul moves heaven. You don't need to strive to be chosen. You are chosen. Full stop. It is not a reward for performance. It is the recognition of essence. Heaven saw your soul before your body took form, and it said, yes, this one. And that yes has echoed through every timeline. That yes is why you're still here. That yes is why darkness couldn't keep you down. That yes is your inheritance, and no one can take it from you. Even now, there are forces moving in your favor, unseen, unnamed, unstoppable, because you are not alone. You never were, and you never will be. The same presence that kept you alive is now preparing to elevate you. Not as a spectacle, but as a signal. You are the evidence that divine protection is real, that spiritual warfare is real, that soul contracts are real, and most of all, that divine love never fails. Take a deep breath, not just with your lungs, but with your spirit. Let it reach into the parts of you that forgot what peace felt like. Let it remind you that you are home now, not in a place, but in a truth. The truth that you were seen, that you were shielded, that you were saved, not from everything, but from the things that would have stolen who you really are. This is not the end of your story. This is the return, the resurrection, the sacred reintroduction of the you that heaven fought for. Walk in that, stand in that, speak from that. Let everything you do carry the weight and wonder of a soul preserved for greatness. Let nothing pull you back into the smallness you outgrew. You didn't come this far to shrink. You came to shine. Heaven didn't fight for your comfort. It fought for your calling. And now it waits, not in judgment, but in joy, watching as you rise into what always was, watching as you live the life that almost didn't happen, watching as you love, lead, create, and elevate, not from ego, but from essence, not from performance, but from power. You are heaven's response to the chaos, heaven's answer to the darkness. You are the light, and the light cannot be hidden. The weight you've carried wasn't just emotional, it was ancestral. You were born into a legacy that required healing, into a bloodline that had wounds buried beneath silence, and without warning or instruction, You became the one who felt it all. Not because life is cruel, but because heaven knew you were the one strong enough to break the chain, strong enough to feel the things no one else wanted to feel, to confront what others buried, to bring light where there was only shadow. That was not a punishment. That was a sacred assignment. The battles that broke others somehow refined you. Not immediately, not painlessly, but deeply. There were nights your soul whispered truths that your mind wasn't ready to hear. But you heard them anyway. You heard the silent cries of your lineage echoing through your bones. And instead of collapsing under the weight, you chose to transmute it, to become the alchemist of pain, the redeemer of sorrow, the vessel through which healing could begin. You became the sanctuary they didn't know they needed. Heaven saw that. That's why it fought for you. You were protected from becoming what hurt you. That is a divine victory. You were shielded from absorbing the very darkness that tried to mold you. There were temptations to harden, to shut down, to numb yourself, and many times you nearly did. But each time, something deeper within refused. It wasn't logic, it was soul memory, a sacred knowing that your softness was your power, that your empathy was your edge, that your capacity to feel was not a flaw, it was a flame, passed down from realms far beyond this one. And though it cost you much, relationships, understanding, even your own sense of belonging, you never lost that flame. Even when the world tried to extinguish it, even when people projected their own pain onto you, even when love was withheld, still you glowed. Still, you offered kindness in places that did not deserve it. Still, you held space for others even when no one was holding space for you. And that is why heaven fought so fiercely. Because you are one of the few who carry sacred fire in a world addicted to cold. Many called you sensitive, too much, too intense. But what they didn't know is that your sensitivity is not fragility, it's spiritual depth. It's ancient sight. It's the ability to feel frequencies before they fully form. You sense what others can't articulate. You recognize pain that's masked by smiles. You feel the shifts in people's energy long before their words reveal the truth. That is not something to be ashamed of. That is a divine instrument tuned by heaven itself, and it needed protecting. There are places you could have ended up that would have destroyed your light. People who almost had access to your heart, only to be blocked last second by divine interference. You may have mourned those losses, but they were actually escapes. Some connections were detoured not because you failed, but because heaven intervened. Because your destiny required clarity, not confusion. Integrity, not manipulation. Freedom, not entanglement. And even when you fought to keep what was never meant to stay, grace gently unwrapped your fingers and led you towards something higher. And now you find yourself at the edge of something vast, something holy, a version of you emerging that's not tainted by what happened, but empowered by what was survived. A self that does not seek approval because it remembers its origin. A soul that no longer fears rejection because it understands sacred redirection. You are no longer just surviving, you are starting to embody. And that shift is not subtle, it is seismic. It is the sound of destiny cracking open under your feet. You're being positioned for places your trauma tried to talk you out of. For stages your insecurity said you weren't worthy of. For connections that see you, not just the polished version, but the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are. The you that carries both wounds and wisdom, scars and sanctity. That is the version heaven preserved. That is the essence that darkness could not touch. And now, it rises, not to prove anything, but simply to be. Every whisper that told you to give up was a lie, a final attempt by opposing forces to make you forget who you are. But somewhere inside, a deeper voice spoke louder. A voice not of fear, but of knowing, of certainty, of remembrance. It reminded you of battles you'd already won, of ancestors who dreamed of this moment, of promises whispered across time, and even in exhaustion, that voice pulled you through. That voice was heaven's. You've often felt out of place in this world, and that's because you weren't made entirely for it. Parts of you were forged in the eternal, molded in the in-between. You are both here and beyond, both grounded and transcendent. And that duality confused people. They didn't know how to hold something so sacred in human form. But you're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to awaken those who are ready and protect the light from those who are not. The soul work you've done echoes louder than any words. People feel your energy before you speak. They feel your depth before you reveal your story. That's the gift of carrying spiritual gravity. You don't have to shout to be felt. You don't have to convince to be known. You just have to be, because your being is encoded with divinity, and heaven fought to keep that being intact. So many times you've asked, why me? And the answer has always been the same, because you're the one who would not turn bitter, the one who could walk through fire and still sing, the one who would carry hope like a torch into places forgotten by light. You were the one who could break without becoming broken. And now, you know why it had to be you. Because you are the key, the turning point, the divine disruption that rewrites everything. Your story isn't just yours, it's a ripple, a resonance. It changes things. It makes people believe again. It wakes them up to their own light. And that kind of impact requires divine backing. That kind of ripple needs protection. That is why heaven assigned watchers to your path. Why doors closed when you begged them to stay open. Why opportunities disappeared only to be replaced by something far better. It was all choreography, holy movement, a divine dance timed beyond your comprehension. You may still feel the sting of what didn't happen, of what was lost, of what was withheld. But soon, you'll see that it all made space for what's arriving. The joy that doesn't leave, the love that doesn't fade, the peace that isn't circumstantial. These aren't just blessings, they are alignments, signs that your soul is now safe enough to receive what it was always meant to carry. You're not the same person who once doubted everything. You've seen too much now, felt too deeply, survived too fiercely. You know too much about your own strength, and heaven is proud. Not in some abstract, distant way, but intimately, fiercely. You are celebrated in realms you can't yet see. The battles you fought were not in vain. They were training, initiation, preparation for the realm of impact you're about to enter. This is not hype. This is heritage. You were never meant to blend in. You were always meant to build something no one else could. And that vision required stripping. It required solitude. It required refinement. And now it requires courage. Because to step into your calling is to say yes to a life of light in a world that often prefers the dark. But you were made for this. So walk tall, chosen one, not with arrogance, but with holy confidence, knowing that the soul within you has been fought for, protected, preserved. You don't need to earn your place. You are the place, the temple, the message, the miracle. And from this point forward, your very presence will shift rooms. Because the soul that was once under attack is now under divine command, and nothing can stop what's already been sealed in heaven. You've walked paths others couldn't see. You've braved storms that never made the news. You've held on to hope with shaking hands, whispering prayers no one else heard. And still, somehow, you kept going. You kept moving forward through terrain that looked like endings but were really sacred beginnings. And it wasn't because you had it all figured out. It was because something ancient inside you refused to give up. That something is what heaven fought to preserve. There are forces in this world that recognize light the moment it arrives, not just in halos or fire, but in a person's persistence, their grace, their refusal to sink even when they're drowning. That light has always lived in you, even when you didn't feel it, even when you doubted it, even when you thought it had gone out. It was still there, burning quietly beneath the ashes, waiting for a moment to rise again. Heaven never mistook your dimness for defeat. It saw your heart, even in hiding, because you, chosen one, are the proof that resilience is divine, that gentleness can be a sword, that loving when it's hardest is the greatest power of all. And the very moment darkness realized what you were, it marked you, not to harm you, but to halt you, to delay the inevitable. Because once you stood fully in your truth, nothing would be able to silence you again. Not shame, not fear, not the memories of who you used to be. There were times the pressure was unbearable, times when you thought maybe this path was a mistake. That being different wasn't a gift, it was a curse. That your depth made you too heavy to carry, that your visions made you too strange to be understood. But all of that pain was pruning. Every time you were misunderstood, a false identity was stripped away. Every betrayal pushed you closer to your essence. Every delay carved out the patience necessary for destiny. This was never about becoming something else. It was always about remembering who you were before the world told you to be anything at all. You were not here to conform to their expectations. You were here to awaken them with your being, to make them feel something again, to reintroduce them to wonder. And that work is holy. That mission is cosmic. That's why your life was never easy, because your calling was never small. Heaven did not protect your soul so that you could settle for comfort. You were kept intact for a purpose far greater than safety. You were designed for breakthrough, built for revelation. You were sent to crack open cages that others forgot they were trapped inside. And to do that, you had to be free first. That freedom came at a cost. At times, it looked like isolation. At times, it felt like abandonment. But every season of silence was heaven preparing the stage for your voice. You weren't being punished. You were being hidden. Hidden in plain sight. Shielded from distractions, counterfeit connections, and premature praise. Because heaven knew what you carried, and it knew that timing would be everything. So while others ran ahead, you were asked to wait. While others were seen, you were asked to go unseen. But what was growing in secret will now bloom in full view, and it will not be denied. Your story is not just inspiring, it's disruptive, because you didn't just overcome, you transcended. You didn't just survive, you evolved. You didn't just heal, you transformed your pain into power, your fear into focus, your wounds into wisdom. And now, your presence alone speaks. Without a word, you testify to grace. Without an audience, you alter atmospheres. Because you, chosen one, are walking proof that what heaven touches, no darkness can destroy. Some will ask how you made it. They'll want formulas, strategies, step-by-step guides, but you'll know the truth. It was never a method, it was mercy. Never just strength, It was sacred fire, never just willpower. It was the war in heaven fought on your behalf, long before you even knew you were under attack. What they'll see as a miracle was, in fact, divine protection, orchestrated over a lifetime. You are not here to compete. You are not here to convince. You are here to carry presence, to shift frequencies, to remind people of who they are by simply being who you've become. That's why it felt so hard to find your place, because you weren't meant to fit into broken systems. You were meant to build new ones, to design temples where others only saw rubble, to draw maps in territories where others saw chaos. That's what your soul was preserved for. And now, everything that tried to stop you becomes a platform. Every detour becomes direction. Every scar becomes a doorway. You are not damaged, you are designed. Every part of your past has been divinely recycled. Every ache has been rewritten in the language of destiny. And heaven smiles at the blueprint it never stopped believing in: you. So breathe. You're not behind. You're not lost. You're not late. You are exactly where you are meant to be, for the impact your soul was born to make. There are no missed moments in heaven's timeline. Nothing was wasted. Not a tear, not a season, not a single step. It all mattered. It all shaped you. And now, it all serves you. Don't be surprised when the doors start opening, when the connections come without force, when the opportunities align without striving. This isn't luck. It's legacy. It's the unveiling of what was always yours. And as it arrives, you'll feel it. The peace that comes when your soul finally recognizes itself in the mirror of reality. Not distorted, not diminished, but divine, fully seen, fully held, fully known. And still, this is just the beginning. Because what heaven protected was not just your survival, it was your contribution, your voice, your resonance, your blueprint. And now that you're here, now that you remember, the real movement begins. You didn't arrive here by accident. You weren't merely lucky to have made it through what tried to erase you. Every step was watched. Every moment you felt forgotten was a moment heaven doubled its guard. Every time your voice was silenced, the skies recorded the truth of what you tried to say. There were battles raging over your spirit that your eyes couldn't see, but heaven saw them, and it stood between you and what was meant to consume you. Not all victories come with applause. Some come in stillness, in the quiet resilience of a soul that refuses to surrender. That was your battlefield. That was your war. And heaven celebrated your unseen triumphs long before the world caught on. It wasn't about proving your strength. It was about preserving your light. Because even in your darkest nights, your spirit radiated something sacred, something eternal, something that even shadows respected. There were moments when it looked like the end, moments when everything you built came crashing down, when your faith trembled and your hope felt like an echo in an empty room. But even then, heaven never panicked. The angels didn't retreat. Your protection didn't weaken. Because they knew this was the moment your roots would grow deeper. This was the moment you would discover who you were without titles, without noise, without validation. This was the moment your soul would anchor itself not in approval, but in truth. And in those low valleys, you changed. You softened, but you didn't break. You surrendered, but you didn't collapse. You stopped pretending and started becoming. That's what heaven fought for. Not your perfection, but your authenticity. Not the version of you the world wanted, but the one it needs. The one who doesn't hide anymore. The one who knows the cost of silence and chooses to speak anyway. The one who has suffered and still chooses compassion over cruelty, who has lost and still chooses to love. The protection you received wasn't always gentle. Sometimes it looked like rejection. Sometimes it looked like a closed door, a missed opportunity, a connection that never bloomed. But each of those no's carried a hidden mercy. Each disappointment carried heaven's handwriting. Not this, not yet, not here. Trust me. And when you look back now, you'll start to see it. You weren't being punished, you were being positioned. You've been placed exactly where your impact will be the loudest, not in volume, but in vibration. You don't need crowds to shake the earth. Your energy is what moves mountains. Your alignment is what bends time. You are not just here to live. You are here to activate destinies, just by walking in your own. And that is why the divine fought so fiercely to preserve your journey. You'll notice something new in this season, a clarity you didn't have before. People may think you've changed overnight, but this clarity has been forming quietly for years. It's the result of storms you never told anyone about, of nights you didn't think you'd survive, of lessons carved into your bones, and now you walk with the wisdom of someone who knows how precious life is, who knows how sacred presence is, who knows how rare truth is. That is your treasure. What others call charisma in you is really clarity. What they call magnetism is really alignment. What they feel around you isn't charm, it's presence. That's what heaven preserved. Not just your life, but your essence. The part of you that brings others home to themselves. The frequency that reminds people they're not alone. That if you made it, maybe they can too. And now, chosen one, the tests are turning into testimony. The weight is turning into wings. You'll speak, and chains will break. Not because you demand attention, but because your voice carries a frequency that hearts recognize. You'll walk into rooms and shift the atmosphere, not because of your name, but because of your nature. You carry the memory of what heaven fought to save, and that memory will never fade. Don't shrink when they notice. Don't flinch when they ask, what changed? Tell them the truth. Everything tried to break me, but something greater wouldn't let go. Something holy stood in the gap. Something I couldn't see protected everything I was meant to become. That is your truth. That is your gift. You are not fragile anymore. Not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. The softness in your spirit is now a strength, not a wound. The tenderness in your words is now a tool, not a weakness. You're learning to stand not with force, but with grace. Not by shouting, but by radiating. That's power. The kind of power that heaven trusts. There are still battles ahead, yes, but you are no longer walking into them unarmed. You are carrying insight, memory, fire. You know now what's been placed inside of you. You understand the worth of your own soul. You understand why heaven fought so hard to keep you breathing. Not just so you could survive, but so you could rise. And rise you will.